The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to part 3 of the Work Zone webinar series. My name is Mike Fitch with the Ohio LTAP Center here at ODOT, and we appreciate your participation. As we get started, please take a moment to locate the questions box in the GoToWebinar panel. During the presentation today, please use the questions box to send in any questions you might have. With that, we will go ahead and turn things over to Ray Brushart. Hello.
Hello, Mike, and hello, everybody. Welcome back. We're here to start part 3 of our 4-part webinar series. And I think we finished up the last point. I know we were talking about some tapers, and we got into merging taper lengths, and I showed another typical application where how they had back-to-back tapers closing 2 lanes down on a multi-lane highway with back-to-back tapers. That was typical application 32, and so that's how far we got last time. And and I think we did some knowledge check questions on that about how to determine the length, how merging tapers vary with speed, the length of them. And so let's do a recap of that. Let's do a pop quiz question. So the question would be, if you have a 4-lane divided highway and you want to close a northbound right lane, and you're going to use typical application 33, how would you determine how long of a merging taper you would need? So the question is, how long is a merging taper for a 55-mile-per-hour design speed? Do you all remember how to figure that out?
So Ray,
Mike, let's see if we got some questions, some answers rolling in.
All
in
right.
The chat box. Answer in the chat box.
Well, the questions box is available to everyone, so feel free to type into the questions box. Question from Nathan. Ray, how wide is the lane?
All right, let's assume a 12-foot lane.
So Michael says 660. Doug says 660 feet.
All right.
Thomas says 660 feet.
Okay.
And we have Rachel and Matt agreeing with that.
All right. Well, it sounds like everybody remembers how to do that. So I'm assuming you were using the tables that we talked about on our guidelines for traffic control and work zones flip book, and also the app that you could download. And when you click on spacing on the app, you can see those 3 tables. And the bottom table is all about tapers and flagger stations and the buffer space and things like that. So if you looked at that table and looked at 55 miles per hour and went over to merging taper, you'd see that everybody is correct, that the length would be 660 feet. So very good. So well, let's move on right along then. And you can keep your app open, because I'll probably be referring to it throughout this webinar today. So we're going to move on and talk about flagging and flagging operations, and how to install a proper flagging operation so that everyone is safe out there. We want the workers to be safe, and we want the motorists to be safe as well. And so traffic flagging. So let's talk about the flaggers first. The people who are actually doing the flagging, they're stopping and traffic and then releasing them, or at least slowing them down in some cases. So our flaggers are critical to traffic safety, and the consequences of improper flagging may be severe. So we know that flaggers have some very important responsibilities. And so in this slide where we see a flagger, he's standing in the proper or the preferred location on the shoulder of the roadway at the beginning of a cone taper. He's not standing out in the lane. And we know that lots of people depend on the flagger's clear guidance. So who are these people that depend on the flagger? Well, of course, our road crew out there, the workers, and of course the motorists. And you might be flagging on a 2-lane street that might be more urban than rural. And so you might have pedestrians or bicyclists or some even some school kids running around. And of course, the flagger, him or herself, depends on them doing their job properly. So it's important for the flagger to follow standard and uniform flagging procedure. This increases motorist respect and promotes a uniform response from the motorists, and minimizes drivers' confusion, which is very important. And some rules that flaggers must follow here. Our flaggers need to stay alert at all times and face oncoming traffic. They need to be highly visible, and we'll get into exactly what that means. And our flaggers need to be standing alone on the shoulder of the roadway. They should be placed well before the actual work site, and they need to make sure they're staying out of the path of vehicles. So it turns out that not just anyone can be a flagger. We need to choose our flaggers from people that have the ability to communicate instructions well, and they need to be able to maneuver quickly, and the ability to control signaling devices like our stop slow paddle, and they need to apply safe traffic control practices and the ability to recognize dangerous traffic situations and warn others. So we're going to get into the flagger's equipment. And so we have the stop slow paddle, and these stop slow paddles have evolved over the years with their different specifications, but now we require them to be retro-reflectorized, especially for night use. And they come in 2 sizes, 18 by 18 inches or 24 by 24. I mean, I can see why, maybe some crews might have 18 by 18 if maybe they were flagging on a really low speed, low volume residential street that with doesn't carry much traffic. But I personally would never use that. I would always go for the 24 by 24, just so I would make sure that it was visible from more of a distance and really stand out. And we want our stop slow paddle to be fixed to a rigid handle that's from 5 to 7 feet in length. So here's a picture of what we expect these stop slow paddles to look like. The stop side looks just like a stop sign with the white stop legend on a red background and a black slow legend on an orange background. And I get this question a lot about, well, why can't we just use flags all the time? And the manual is pretty specific about this. It says the use of flags should be limited to emergency situations or intersection work or low speed or low volume locations, which can best be controlled by a single flagger. So again, here's a picture of the preferred flagger location. And it says never in the path of moving vehicles. And I'll get into when we are allowed to do that, especially if, the only time you would be moving into the path of, it would be the path of a stopped vehicle would be the only time you get out of that lane of traffic. And as if you've got some cars stopped and they're blocking the cars, might be, of course, every everybody's driving a big pickup or a big SUV these days, it seems like. So if you're still standing on the shoulder with those vehicles starting to queue up, and then the people approaching might not be able to see the flagger and the stop paddle. So at that point, you can make eye contact with the driver of the vehicle that you have first in line there. Make sure they see you, and then you can walk out to the center line, but not beyond it, and put the stop paddle out there so oncoming traffic can see why these vehicles are stopped. And again, we want you to be standing at the beginning of a cone taper. It seems like lately we have this organization, PERP. They're like the OSHA for public employees. It stands for Public Employees Risk Reduction Program. And they've been out there inspecting work zones randomly. And it seems like they've been finding lots of flagging operations out there on these 2-lane rural roads where the flagger is standing there without the proper taper. And that taper is very important because those motorists need to see that taper from a distance and recognize that their lane is closed. So, you want the motorist experience to be seeing those 3 or 4 signs in a row, and then the flagger and the stop paddle, and then that taper. You want that whole visual effect. It's very important. So as far as flagger certification goes, we don't offer that here at Ohio LTAP, the flagger certification. However, we do provide good training in this flagger training, and that's what the manual says, as flaggers should be properly trained in safe traffic control practices. But if you want to be certified as a flagger or registered, and you could go to ATSA. They have a very good website and offer flagger certification and other certifications like worksite supervisor. And they come to Ohio, 4 or 5 times a year. I actually went through that and got my flagger certification. And apparently the Ohio Laborers Union offers training as well for certification. So when we're getting familiar with our temporary traffic control manual, which is part 6 of the OMUTCD, if you're wanting to find out all the information about flagger control, you would go to chapter 6E. And that part of the manual states that when operations are such that signs, signals, and barricades do not provide the necessary protection on or adjacent to a highway or street, flaggers or other appropriate traffic controls shall be provided. And signaling directions by flaggers shall conform to the OMUTCD. So there we have a nice picture of a flagger with the proper signal for stopping traffic. You see their right arm is extended straight out, holding the stop slow paddle, and the left hand is, the palm is facing the motorist, and she's looking at the motorist, trying to establish eye contact with that motorist. So now we're going to get into the essential aspects of a flagging operation, and the best way to remember all this is to remember the ABCs of flagging. So the A stands for advance warning, and B stands for be visible and alert, and C stands for control. So let's talk about the advance warning area of a flagging operation. So the advance warning area lets the public know that you are there. We definitely do not want you to be flagging without the proper signs that alert the motorist that there is a flagger ahead. So this needs to be installed before you start the flagging operation. So the first sign in the series of signs is the road work ahead sign. And this goes hand in hand with typical application number 10 in the manual. And if you're working for a utility crew, then you're permitted to have the utility work ahead sign as your first sign in the series. And then the second sign in the series is the 1-lane road ahead sign. And this microscopic sign is the flag or symbol sign. I don't know why it's so small. I better fix that. That's the flag or symbol sign. So the third sign in the series tells the motorist what we want them to do. So I guess we're telling them to be ready to comply with whatever the flagger is telling you to do, either stop or proceed. And then we have, when you look at the illustration in typical application number 10, you only see 3 signs in that illustration in the advanced warning area. But as I said before, in another part of this series, there's 2 pages to a typical application. So it's very important to read the notes page where the standards and guidance and options are listed. And the be prepared to stop sign is listed in both the guidance and the options. And so the use of this sign is optional. But you might recall that I called the standards, guidance, and options, I referred to them as safe, safer, and safest. But ODOT crews are trained to always use the be prepared to stop sign in their sign series. So they always put out 4 signs. And that's because ODOT crews are always working in roadways. Our 2-lane state highways are all high speed, and some of them have high volumes or sight distance restrictions. And so you may have recalled that when I said that anytime you're working on a roadway that might have high speed or high volume or sight distance restrictions, then you need to really consider utilizing whatever is listed in the typical applications under guidance and options. So you would place this be prepared to stop sign directly before the flagger ahead symbol sign. So another thing about our advanced warning area, you know, we're flagging on 2-lane roadways. And here we see a rural 2-lane roadway. And you know, we want to draw attention to the sign. So one method is to put a cone beside your sign. You know, there's other ways to draw attention to your sign. You could add flashing lights if you want, but this is the cheap and easy way is to add one of your newest, brightest cones to place right beside your sign to help draw attention to it. In typical application number 10, we see a series of signs, and then of course the top table on page 17 of our guidebook or the app under spacing is all about how to properly space our signs. And so looks like in the picture here, that's probably, I'm just going to guess that that's 100 feet between signs. It looks shorter, but you know, in low speed urban locations, you can have the signs 100 feet apart, but then high speed urban is 350, and then rural areas and higher speeds is 500 feet apart. So the type of road you're working on has a direct impact on the spacing of your signs. A couple more details about sign placement is like on the left, we see road work ahead signs where they're not really visible from a distance because it's obstructed by a utility pole. So, you know, when you place your signs, you want to make sure that they are visible from a good distance. And then on the right, we see signs that are placed in the middle of a sidewalk, and we don't really like that either because sidewalks are there for, of course, those sidewalks in that picture are kind of under construction, so they're probably closed to pedestrian traffic at the time. But in general, we prefer not to have signs on a sidewalk if you can avoid that at all. So I'd rather have it maybe next to the curb in the street or in a parking area on the street. So that's the details of the advanced warning area, and that the part of the A for ABC. So let's move on to the B in the ABCs. So B stands for be visible and alert. So we need to make sure the public sees you from a distance. And so we need to make sure you have the proper flagging apparel and equipment. So here's a good illustration of where to stand and where not to stand. So if you're flagging near a horizontal curve or a vertical curve, you want to make sure that you take position in advance of that curve, and to make sure you're visible to approaching traffic. So you don't want to take a position around a curve or over a hill where you run the risk of surprising the motorists when they get too close to you to stop when you need them to. And that's why the illustration in typical application number 10 is drawn the way it's drawn, because it's showing a curve, but it's clearly showing the advanced warning signs and the flagger in the straight section before the curve, whether that curve is vertical or horizontal. So we need our flaggers to comply with this proper safety apparel. And the manual says that flaggers shall wear, it's not should, it's shall wear high visibility safety apparel that meets the performance class 2 or 3 requirements of the ANSI ISEA, that stands for American National Standard for High Visibility Apparel and Headwear. And your apparel should have a tag on it that says that it complies with that. So that paragraph is taken directly from the manual on page 647. So here's some examples of approved apparel. During daytime flagging in Ohio, you're still allowed to wear a class 2 garment. Some states have already moved to a class 3 garment, which is what is required in Ohio for nighttime flagging. And ODOT crews are trained to wear a hard hat when they're flagging. Maybe some locals don't stipulate that, but ODOT does. This flagger is very visible. He's wearing an entire outfit that's made up of class 3. His vest and trousers are both class 3, so they're more retro-reflective. I think the difference is maybe the sleeves have the retro-reflectivity, and of course the pants have retro-reflectivity. Okay, so then we move on to the type of taper that we use in a flagging operation. So when you look at that typical application, you'll see a taper, and it says that the length of that taper is 50 to 100 feet. It's not based upon the speed of traffic like a merging taper. And so it's a shorter taper. And the theory is that a shorter taper where the cones are closer together, it really draws attention to the motorists, because what they see from a distance is a wall of cones across their lane. So that's very important to not skip the installation of the cone taper. So so a 50-foot minimum length to a 100-foot maximum length. And it says the shorter tapers encourage drivers to slow down. But like I said, it's because if it's installed right, it looks like a wall of cones across their lanes, even though it's might be 100 feet long. So here's a depiction of the one-lane two-way traffic taper. And then you see the flagger standing on the shoulder at the very beginning of that taper. Okay, so that's the be visible part, and now we're getting into the control aspect of flagging. So a flagger is considered to be a legal traffic control device that must be obeyed. And so the flagger needs to develop these 3 basic flagging skills: stopping traffic, releasing traffic, and slowing traffic. And so in our guidebook, we have these drawings in here that show the basic flagging techniques with both a stop slow paddle and a red flag. And so we see here on the left how to stop traffic. So again, the stop slow paddle, the stop sign is facing oncoming traffic with the flagger has his right arm straight out and his left hand is raised, his elbow bent, but the palm is facing the motorist. Straight out, and the flag is hanging down. And then over on the right, to release traffic, you're going to have the slow part of the paddle facing traffic, and then I have some better pictures of that here in a little bit. And then the flag, he's raising the flag up to shoulder height, but not above shoulder height, and then back down. So let's have some pictures we took in the field of flaggers doing it right. And so here's the flagger stopping traffic. You see she's at the beginning of a cone taper. She has another cone right at her feet. And then we have the slow traffic, releasing traffic. And so slow is facing the motorist, and then he's using his left hand. He's pointing to the open lane, and he's not waving the sign, so the sign stays still. And into slow traffic. Sometimes you don't need to stop the traffic. You just want them to slow down. So again, the slow sign is pointing at the motorist, and then he's using his left hand, as you see it in the pictures, and he's moving his hand up and down, like pumping it up and down to slow traffic down. And then we have pictures of bad flaggers in action. We don't want you to become a target, so we don't want you standing like this guy. So he's kind of set up permanent shop there in that lane, so that's not correct. We need him to be on the shoulder of the road. And then here's another example, a bad example. He's standing, he's just not set up correctly. He should be closer to us at the beginning of a cone taper by the side of the road, and he's standing up by the parked vehicles out near, he's in the lane of traffic clearly, so we don't want it set up that way. And so we actually have some really good resources here. There are several flagging training videos that we have on our Ohio LTAP YouTube channel. The best way to find them is to go to the Ohio LTAP YouTube channel and then type in the search box, like that first video is from the Virginia Department of Transportation. So if you can just type in flagging and then the plus sign and then Virginia, and you will find they have like 2 really good videos on their website that I would sometimes use that in my circuit rider version of this class. And then if you really want to be safe out there in the flagger, some states are using portable temporary rumble strips in the advance warning area. If you're concerned about distracted drivers approaching you, one way to make sure they're not distracted is to put out a few portable temporary rumble strips before the flagger. And they'll definitely be focused on the road after they hit those. And so that's also on our YouTube channel. Just go to the search box and type in Virginia plus portable temporary rumble strips, and you'll see their video. They show what they look like and then how the crew installs them and where they place them. Okay, so what else can we talk about with flagging? We can, do we have any questions about flagging?
Thanks, Ray. Yeah, we do. In the chat section, I've copied 2 questions from our attendees this afternoon.
Okay. I don't know if I can see the chat box.
Oh, it should be at
So
the
can you
very...
read them to me?
Sure. Question 1 from Mitch. He said, what precautions do we need to flag in icy conditions?
Ooh. Flagging in icy conditions. Well, it kind of makes sense that maybe you should, if it's not an emergency, make sure you eliminate the ice in the roadway approaching the flagger. Salt and plow and stuff like that. You don't want to create icy conditions before the flagger. That sounds like bad news. And maybe keep it salted, and make sure you have it cleared where the flagger has a place to stand. I mean, if the flagger doesn't have a safe place to stand, that would not be good. I mean, I have seen automated flaggers out there. There's actually a section on automated flaggers in the temporary traffic control manual, and they're actually becoming quite common around the state, I've noticed. I've even seen portable traffic signals used instead of flaggers, but I guess that's all I have on that one. Can whoever wrote the question maybe clue us in on what they were flagging for out there under icy conditions? I don't think I've heard of such a thing.
And Ray, in the meantime, question 2 is from Michael. He said, can you place signs on telephone poles?
You are permitted to place signs on utility poles. It says that right in part 2 of the manual. But you want those utility poles to be, close enough to the edge of pavement that they really stand out. I mean, you don't want, it's a judgment call there, because, I mean, if that roadway has signs on utility poles, then that's where they're used already, then that must be someone actually must have thought of that, and that the utility poles are actually close enough to the motorists as they drive by for them to be effective. So the manual says you are permitted to put traffic signs on utility poles, but when it comes to flagging signs, just rethink that and just use engineering judgment on will the motorist see them and recognize them.
We have a question from Melvin who says, what is considered to be too much rain to be on the road flagging?
Ooh. Well, just using common sense there. I mean, if the road's closed because of flooding, that would be enough for me. But you don't want, each roadway is different. Some roads have really good drainage, and some don't. You don't want to be standing there on the side of the road where it's so slick that if that roadway has a very low friction value, that it could affect your safety. That's a tough question. Or if it has a lot of where they just crack sealed all over that road, that would even, I know that can make it slick as well. So I don't know. I guess I'd have to, I would hope that the crew would get together and use some engineering judgment on if it is safe for that or not.
Thanks, Ray.
What else?
We do not have any additional questions at this time.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and talk about mobile, and then after that, I want to talk about. Let's see, what time do I have you till? What time does this end, Mike?
I believe we go till 2:30.
Okay. Well, that's good. Thought I was running out of time. Okay, so let's move on to mobile operations. And so let me see here. I saw the flagging, and then isn't there mobile next? Oh, I don't think so. Is it? There's street closures. Come up here to mobile. What's before flagging? Anyway, let's talk about we talked about flagging on 2-lane roads, and now let's move to mobile operations on a 2-lane road. So it's a different typical application. There's about 4 or 5 typical applications that deal with mobile operations. And so typical application number 17, for example, let's get to that here. I have so if you have the app downloaded, you can open it up. And go to typical application number 17. See if I can beat you there. So there's 4. Okay, here's 17. Okay, so this is the illustration for typical application number 17. And mobile operations on a 2-lane road. So let's take a look at this picture and then discuss the notes page, because that's it's very important if you're selecting a mobile operation on a 2-lane road to really consider both pages. It's one of the most important things of all typical applications. To make sure you read the notes page, it would be this one. Okay, so in this picture we see a 2-lane road, and let's look at the traffic control on that road. So it has yellow dashed lines in the middle. So that means something. And if it, could be yellow dashed lines, or it could be a double yellow line. And so the fact that it has dashed yellow lines, that means that passing is permitted. Okay, but it's up to the motorist to decide when is a good time to pass. They have to pick the gap in traffic to pass that vehicle. And so being that passing is permitted, they're showing an optional arrow panel set to caution mode. So Mike, can you see my arrow when I circle things or not? You must be on mute. But when the arrow panel has the 4 corners in it, that's caution mode. So what that is telling the motorist, it's doing 2 things. One, it's enhancing visibility of the mobile operation. Secondly, it's telling the motorist that it's okay to pass, but it's up to the motorist to decide when to pass. ODOT crews, when we're working on a mobile operation on our 2-lane state highways, we've trained our crews to never mix flagging with mobile operations, because we don't want people flagging. Our roadways are always high speed or high volume or sight distance restrictions, and we feel that would put the flagger in an unsafe situation when it's not a stationary operation. And so, but I'm going to get into, after this, I'm going to discuss how at the local level, local agencies, there are times when it's okay to mix or combine flagging with mobile operations. In fact, I'm on the committee. I talked about in part 1 that there was an update to the Federal Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, and that Ohio now has up to 2 years, about a year and a half left on our expiration date to publish a supplement to the MUTCD, and so we're going to update each part of the OMUTCD, and we're going to be considering some typical applications that other states have that we don't, and one of them is a typical application that shows the use of flaggers with a mobile operation. So that will be forthcoming in our decision making. But like I said, several states already have that typical application and use it because it makes sense in a lot of local streets that have lower speeds, even lower volumes, and they can set up between intersections with the flaggers and stuff. But this typical application has no flaggers. Okay, this is strictly a mobile operation, and so it shows so that this arrow panel set to caution mode is optional because you have decisions to make with that. If you're not going to permit passing, then maybe you should not be using that. And you definitely don't want it to be on arrow mode on a 2-lane road because you would be creating a head-on collision because there's traffic coming the other way. And then what's not an option, it's a standard, is the sign on the back of the shadow vehicle. It says, use sign, shape, and legend appropriate to the type of work. So it's important to let the motorist know what's going on in front of that shadow truck because they can't see around the shadow truck. And so, like, if you're patching potholes, then you should have the sign that shows the symbol of a man with a shovel. Okay, that's the symbol for pothole patching. Or, if you're doing other mobile operations like leaf pickup or tree trimming or something like that, you should have, specific signs made up that say tree trimming ahead or mowing ahead or something like that. And, there are times that ODOT crews, when we have curvy and hilly state routes, with our mowers, we usually have nice wide shoulders on our 2-lane state routes for the mower to be always out of the lane of traffic. However, there's times where we don't, and so sometimes we protect our mower with a shadow vehicle, so we set up with this typical application. And then sometimes that's still too dangerous, so we don't use the typical application for mowing certain sections of 2-lane state routes. We actually set up flagging operations for those sections of the highway that are just too dangerous for the mower because the motorists won't have the proper sight distance to see that flagger in time to slow down. Okay, so another question I get on this is, well, heck, Ray, we don't use a shadow truck. Why do we have to use a shadow truck? Well, it's there to protect the workers that are following the work vehicle. And, for the locals, you got to keep in mind, we're not talking about your very low volume, low speed residential streets that you do this on. So we're talking about, if you work for a city or a village, we're talking about your main streets, your main 2-lane roadways here, your collector streets or your 2-lane minor or major arterials. When you're working on those streets and you're selecting a mobile operation, then you definitely have to have the shadow vehicle. And so let's talk a little bit more about that shadow vehicle. So we got to come up here to the notes page because the shadow truck is discussed in here on several things. Let's look at the standards. Now that we're familiar with the drawing, the illustration of the setup, let's look at the standards. Standard number 1 mentions the vehicle mounted sign. that you must have. It says that shall be covered or turned from view when work is not in progress. But also says vehicle mounted signs shall be mounted in a manner such that they are not obscured by equipment or supplies. And then number 2 is all about your lighting package on your shadow and work vehicles. So this is a standard. It's a shall condition. When you select a mobile operation, you shall abide by these standards, because remember, it's a state law. So it says the shadow and work vehicles shall display high intensity rotating, flashing, oscillating, or strobe lights. So, you need high intensity strobes. That is your advance warning, because if you're in a mobile operation, it's not like your signs magically follow you, or even if you maybe didn't even put down signs. So, so that is your advance warning. And high intensity strobes can be seen from at least a half mile away. And so it's very important to provide that advance warning. So in those situations where sight distance is really restricted, therein lies your reason for not selecting the mobile operation. You should choose flagging instead. And then number 3 mentions what we talked about before about the arrow board. It says if an arrow board is used, if traffic's not permitted to pass, and you can actually put a regulatory sign, the rectangular white sign with black letters that says no passing. And then it gets into guidance and options, like I call it, safer and safest. So when we get to this section, it talks about something that ODOT workers are familiar with. So it says where practical and when needed, the work and shadow vehicles should pull over periodically to allow vehicular traffic to pass. So you see the word should when it comes to our guidance. And so that means you should do that unless you have a good reason not to. And there are good reasons not to do this at the local level, because local roadways that are 2 lanes, they most of the time don't have a nice wide shoulder to pull over onto to get completely out of that lane of traffic to allow vehicular traffic to pass. So that's something you need to think about before you leave the garage that day and select your this as your typical application. And how are you going to handle traffic that stacks up behind you if you can't get out of that lane onto the shoulder of the road? And so I know a lot of locals then flag traffic around the operation, and that might be okay, but you need to communicate to the motorists in advance to be on the lookout for a flagger. You should never have someone flagging traffic around a mobile operation without the proper signage and the proper flagging apparel and stop slow paddle and things like that. So I'll get into that when I get to the Indiana Temporary Traffic Control Manual and their typical application for that. Okay, so number 5 talks about how a shadow vehicle should never disappear from view from the approaching traffic. You don't want to have the shadow vehicle disappear over a hill or around a curve when traffic is approaching you, especially at high speed. You would surprise the motorist and then they'd crash into you. So it's important that the shadow vehicle slow down in advance of vertical or horizontal curves that restrict sight distance. And so you need to make sure they see you and they get up very close to you before you proceed over that hill or around the curve. And then it says another way to enhance your visibility is to equip the sign on the back of your shadow vehicle with 2 high-intensity flashing lights, so mounted on the rear adjacent to the sign. So that would enhance your visibility. And then we get down into the options, how to make your mobile work zone the safest. And so the first one talks about, one operation that's definitely a mobile operation is when you're painting pavement markings. So it talks about the how the work and shadow vehicles, the distance between them may vary according to terrain and paint drying time and other factors. So you need to determine that, considering your product and things like that. And make sure another thing is don't get so far apart that motorists might pass the shadow vehicle and then get in between the shadow vehicle and the paint truck. You don't want that either. Then number 8 talks about providing additional shadow vehicles to warn and reduce the speed of oncoming or opposing vehicular traffic. And you can use law enforcement vehicles for this purpose. So, several typical applications discuss the use of law enforcement in your work zone. And so that definitely adds safety to your work zone. And I actually saw a mobile operation a couple weeks ago where they were providing additional shadow vehicles, including in the other direction to slow traffic down. And that was a very good job. And then number 9, at this point, we've tried to be as safe as possible, but yet a crash still happens. We talked about work zone crashes. So number 9 is all about how to reduce the severity of a work zone crash. And so it mentions the use of a truck-mounted attenuator on the back of the shadow vehicle or the work vehicle. So the truck-mounted attenuator is always used by ODOT crews. And we've had them hit many times in the last few years. So, and they actually work. They absorb the crash. And we actually had a crew, I don't know, a few years ago, pretty famous crash on Route 23 by Marion, Ohio, where a 18-wheeler hit our crew going 65 miles an hour, crashed into the truck-mounted attenuator, and no one was seriously injured or even hardly injured at all. And so that's how well they work. And so we definitely use them in our mobile operations. And so number 10 mentions the providing a do not pass sign if the work and shadow vehicles cannot pull over to allow vehicular traffic to pass frequently. So that's what ODOT crews do when they know they're not working on a state route with a nice wide shoulder, because like I said, we don't flag with our mobile operations. And so anyway, those are some very good notes. Number 12 is a standard. It says vehicle hazard warning signals shall not be used instead of the vehicle's high intensity rotating, flashing, oscillating, or strobe lights. So that's why you have to have a specific lighting package, high intensity lighting package on your shadow truck and work trucks when you select this moving or mobile operation. So, and then there's some more mobile operations. So we have another one is a mobile operation on a 2-lane road. So let's check it out. So we got, that's typical application number 35. So you can look at that in your app as well. Usually when locals see this, they're stunned by it a little bit. They kind of chuckle, and but I'll tell you why that is. So, so this is a mobile operation on a multi-lane road. So we have, obviously a 6-lane divided freeway we're showing here, where where we have our mobile operation. And so, as you can see, we have 2 arrow trucks. So one's on the shoulder, and then the other one is in the lane where the work is taking place. And so we definitely have our arrow board set to arrow mode because it's multiple lane roadways and clearly traffic and free flow around us to the right, unlike the previous mobile operation on a 2-lane road. and showing the optional truck-mounted attenuators on both aero boards. So then you might be thinking, well, Ray, I work for a city, and our multi-lane road consists of a 4-lane road with hardly any shoulder whatsoever. It might be curb and gutter. So what do we do then? Well, then you obviously wouldn't have that first aero board on the shoulder, but you would still have the aero board truck as a shadow truck behind your work vehicle. So then we have our notes page that talks about a lot of things. A lot of these I think pertain to freeway operations, but it talks about the size of your aero panel. It says the minimum size is 60 by 30, and that's not the case if you work for a local government, because you're permitted to have your 48-inch by 24-inch aero board. And so this would be like an ODOT specific spec, where we're out there on our 6-lane divided expressways and freeways. We actually prefer a 96-inch aero panel. So then we have some of these are just the same notes as before, but number 4 is new. It says an aero board shall be used when a freeway lane is closed. When more than one freeway lane is closed, a separate aero board shall be used for each closed lane. So that's freeway specific. And then we have some guidance how to enhance the safety, and that's vehicles used for these operations should be made highly visible with appropriate equipment, such as flags, signs, or aero boards. And shadow vehicle number 1 should be equipped with an aero board and truck-mounted attenuator. And number 2, with an aero board and appropriate lane closure sign should be placed on shadow vehicle 2 so as not to obscure the aero board. So these notes are pretty specific here, and also working during off-peak hours, if at all possible. That should be the same with any lane closure on an arterial roadway or a major collector. Then what else here? Some guidance for these vehicles. It says when the work vehicle occupies an interior lane, a lane other than the far right or far left of a directional roadway, having a right-hand shoulder 10 feet or more in width, shadow vehicle 2 should drive the right-hand shoulder with a sign indicating that work is taking place in the interior lane. So if you were thinking of how we would do that in the middle lane, there's your note for that. And then we get down into the options. How can we make this as safe as possible? So it says the addition of truck-mounted attenuators, and on high-speed roadways, a third shadow vehicle not shown may be used with shadow vehicle number 1 in the closed lane, shadow vehicle 2 straddling the edge line, and shadow 3 on the shoulder. So it kind of gives like a chevron effect as you approach from a distance. And it says where adequate shoulder width is not available, shadow vehicle 3 may also straddle the edge line. All right, so then we have a couple of others that involve mobile operations. They're on the shoulder. Let's check those out. If I can move this box out of my way. Okay, let me scroll up here to typical application number 4. So number 4 is short duration or mobile operation on a shoulder. And so, of course, state of Ohio roadways, ODOT roadways, have nice wide shoulders. And, a lot of local roadways have nice wide shoulders. So if you're out there just working on the shoulder, then this is how your setup should look. You've got, you probably notice right off the bat on this 2-lane road, it's got the arrow panel set to caution mode. And so that lets the operation be seen from a distance, and it the signs that precede that are road work ahead and shoulder work ahead. And so that it lets the motorists know that we're not working in their lane of traffic, and we're not even sticking out at all into the lane of traffic in this particular typical application. And so then the notes page here is zoom in here. It goes, let's see what the standards are. That says vehicle hazard warning signals shall not be used instead of the vehicle's high intensity rotating flash. So high intensity strobes are required. And it says if an arrow board is used for an operation on the shoulder, the caution mode shall be used. And then vehicle mounted signs shall be mounted in a manner such that they're not obscured by equipment or supplies. Sign legends on vehicle mounted signs shall be covered or turned from view when work is not in progress. And then we get to the guidance at the top. It says in those situations where multiple work locations within a limited distance make it practical to place stationary signs, the distance between the advanced warning signs and the work should not exceed 5 miles. And so it kind of makes sense on our state highways, but locals, of course, their entire the entire boundary of their village or city does not exceed 5 miles. So you need to come up with your, it's probably not a sign that you would use, or you would come up with your own specified distance on that. Like a lot of township and county roads have a 1 mile specification, especially when like you see these paving operations that are a mile long, or right around 5,000 feet long a lot of times. And so when you're using those 2 miles to 5 miles signs, it says a supplemental distance plaque should be used with the road work ahead sign. So they want you to specify that distance, whatever it is. And then when we get to options, how do we make it as safe as possible? The road work next blank miles sign may be used instead of the road work ahead sign if the work locations occur over a distance of more than 2 miles. And stationary warning signs may be omitted for short duration or mobile operations if the work vehicle displays high intensity rotating, flashing, oscillating, or strobe lights. So that would be a judgment call on your part. And then vehicle hazard warning signals may be used to supplement high intensity rotating, flashing, or strobe lights. So I guess as long as you have the strobes, you can turn on your hazard warning signals on to supplement them. So that's when you're working on the shoulder and you're not sticking out into the lane of travel at all. And then this next one is a shoulder closure on a freeway. And as you can see, they're using when you're working in that high of speed and volume, they're including crash cushions and things like that. But I want to show you typical application number 6, where you are sticking out into the lane of traffic. When you're working on the shoulder, but you're into the lane of traffic as well. Let's show you the picture first. So in this picture, you see how the cones are placed. They have a shoulder taper, which is 1/3 the length of a merging taper, as you can see. And then the cones are actually in the lane of traffic. They're actually sticking out a couple of feet. And that's an ODOT width of a lane. So that's a 12-foot lane, but they've necked it down to 10 feet. So this typical application actually has 2 reasons why it exists. One is to show how to set up your operation when you're sticking out into the lane of traffic. But the second reason it exists is to show you just how narrow you can neck that lane down to. And so at ODOT, when we have a 12-foot lane, we have a policy to not make it any narrower than 10 feet. But when I was at the city of Columbus, not all of our lanes are 12 feet to begin with. We have a lot of 10-foot lanes and or 11-foot lanes. And so we had a policy to, we needed to think about, does that street carry commercial traffic, the big trucks or not? And so if it did carry the big trucks, we would not narrow it down any more than 9 feet. And then if it was just a residential street, then we would be allowed to go down to 8 feet. And so that's you need to come up with your own agency's policies on just how narrow of a lane you're permitted to create. You might have different policies for different streets. And so it's got the it doesn't say shoulder work ahead, does it? It says road work ahead, just because technically they're in the lane of traffic. They're not just on the shoulder. So it's important to you don't want to say shoulder work ahead if you're into that lane of traffic at all, so that you can, so the driver's prepared. They're actually prepared for a full lane closure, but then they get up there and so they don't have to change lanes. And then when you get to the notes page, it'll talk about other things here. So it says, it goes into detail about the 10 feet in width, because that's the ODOT policy. And then it says the treatment shown, the one that you see in the picture, should be used on a minor road having low speeds. For higher speed traffic conditions, a lane closure should be used. So that's important to know, isn't it? So it says for short-term use on low volume, low speed roadways with vehicular traffic that does not include longer and wider heavy commercial vehicle, and minimum lane width of 9 may be used. And then where the opposite shoulder is suitable for carrying out vehicular traffic and adequate width, lanes may be shifted by use of closely spaced channelizing devices, provided that the minimum lane width of 10 feet is maintained. So again, you could translate that and come up with your own policy for your local streets if you're going to do that. And then additional devices. So they're actually giving you an optional sign to use that says road narrows. That's good to know in advance. And temporary traffic barriers may be used along the workspace. A shadow vehicle may be omitted if a taper and channelizing devices are used. A truck-mounted attenuator may be used as a shadow vehicle. And it says for short duration work, that's up to 1 hour, the taper and channelizing devices may be omitted if a shadow vehicle with activated high-intensity rotating, flashing, oscillating, or strobe lights is used. And then it says vehicle hazard warning signals may be used as supplement. We've seen that before on the other ones. And then so the only optional equipment they talked about was signage. So I never did see an arrow board here. So that's different, isn't it? Okay, so when it comes to mobile operations, it's important to put a lot of thought into it, and then ask yourself, how are the motorists going to know we're here? When you select mobile operations as your operation for that time, advanced warning is critical, because it says the use of signs in advance is optional. So you really got to put some thought into it. Plus, if there's any sight distance restrictions like hills and dips, curves, and so you don't just automatically select a mobile operation. You only select this one if you're for certain that it's a good location for a mobile operation. otherwise select something else like flagging or a lane closure and things like that if it's on a multiple lane roadway. Okay, so I want to show you another option for locals when it comes to mobile operations. So I'll show you this handy dandy temporary traffic control manual. It's from the state of Indiana. So there's an LTAP in every state, and we like to help each other out. And so this is the Indiana Local Technical Assistance Program's Handbook for Temporary Traffic Control. So it's almost identical to our app that you have, but there are some differences. So let's check these out. So, and hopefully when we come out with our ODOT supplement to the OMUTCD, there'll be no differences between our states' handbooks. So they have the same typical applications that are identical to ours. There's our flagging operation. You'll see that it's identical to ours. But here's one of the differences. Short-term or short-duration work in a roundabout. So here they have a one-lane roundabout and how to close a lane within that roundabout, or at least one quadrant at a time using flaggers. We'll get back to that in a second. And then here's a two-lane roundabout where there's actually two lanes in the middle of this roundabout, and they're not using flaggers. It looks more like typical application number 33. And then as we continue to move down, we'll see that here's their mobile operations on a two-lane road, and it's identical to ours, okay? But then the next one, we don't have in our manual. It's the mobile operations on a two-lane road using flaggers, and it's number TA-17AY. I don't know why it says AY, but it does. And then some other states have this as well, but this is handy dandy for locals that have lower volume streets or lower speed streets, and nice and straight with no curves and hills, and like city streets, village streets, and things like that. And then, as you can see in this picture, it's a mobile operation. Let me zoom back out so we get the whole picture here. I don't know if that's zoomed in too much or not, but yeah, here we go. So you see a mobile operation. You see the work vehicle and the truck mounted attenuator. It's optional. You see a workspace there. However, you also see the signage for a flagging operation. And if we zoom in, you'll see where the flagger is standing, the red symbol here behind the work vehicle. That's the flagger. And you don't see a cone taper anywhere because this operation is mobile. They're moving down the road very slowly, but for sure. That's one of the problems with a mobile operation is you might be mobile or moving, but yet you're moving much, much slower than the traffic is. So that makes you a target for trouble. So anyway, so you have the signs for flagging, and then the theory is the flaggers move along with the work vehicle. And then you have the flagger on the other side as well with all of their signs. And as you can see in this picture, it's set up between two intersections. And so then the crew does their work between these intersections and then picks up and then goes to another location. So that makes sense for a city street or village street, or even low speed township two-lane roads that have intersections close together. So you can just Google the Indiana Temporary Traffic Control Manual, and you'll have this information. You can download it like I did. Okay, so any questions on mobile operations, Mike?
Hi, Ray. We have several questions on
Okay.
different topics. So, with regard to stop slow paddles, we had a question from Doug, which was, is it acceptable to place the paddle or pole in the top of a cone as long as it is attended by the flagger?
Oh. I don't know. I was taught to never do that, but I guess you might be on a rural location where you have low volumes, a long time between cars, and your arm's getting tired or whatever. I can see that, but the main thing is, yeah, attend it, and you have to still stay alert and facing oncoming traffic. I guess use your judgment on that. But if I had to say yes or no, I'm going to say no.
We
Just
have a
because I was
question.
taught to not do that.
We have a question from Bradley, which is, are vehicles allowed to pass a mobile operation on a 2-lane road?
Okay, well, it's the picture in the typical application we have is a dashed line. And so it's permissive to pass in that situation. But if it's a double yellow line, it's a double yellow line for a reason. It's the double yellow line exists because you don't have the necessary what's called passing sight distance. And so it's dangerous to pass where you have a double yellow line. And that's why in that typical application, in those situations, our crew's supposed to put a no passing sign, regulatory sign, on the back of their shadow vehicle. And they don't use the arrow panel on caution mode in those situations either. That'd be a conflicting message.
Thanks, Ray. We have a question from Kessa, which is, if the OMUTCD doesn't have a way to close a roundabout, are we able to use Indiana's, or is it not allowed if it's not explicitly listed in the OMUTCD?
No, you are permitted to do that. It's listed in the federal manual as well, the MUTCD. Well, when you go to their website, and their website, there's a very good resource that has this. It's the what's it called? The Work Zone Safety Clearinghouse, and those are the exact they are the exact typical applications that's shown there that were adopted by those states.
Thanks, Ray. We do not have any additional questions at this time.
All right. Well, maybe we should do some knowledge check questions. So this is kind of a toughie, but we've got 10 minutes left. I've got confidence in the class. So if I'm on a 2-lane, here's a question. If I'm on a 2-lane rural roadway, I'm working on a pothole. A pothole came into existence overnight. It's a deep one too, so it's going to be a 3.5-hour job to fix this. This is all theoretical. It's going to be a 3.5-hour job, and so I want to know if I'm setting up a flagging operation, and I'm looking at typical application number 10. It's a 55-mile-per-hour 2-lane road. What is the distance necessary from the pothole to where I should place my very first sign, the road work ahead sign? Okay, I want to be completely compliant with typical application number 10. I'm going to use those tables, for sign spacing, and I'm going to install a 100-foot taper. also, in case you're wondering whether to use 50 or 100 for the cone taper. So it's, and I'm definitely using the proper buffer space. So you guys tell me, we'll make sure you're all experts at this point. What is the distance from the pothole all the way back to the road work ahead sign? And we're only going to use, let's just use the 3 signs. We won't use the, it's a nice straight road, kind of low volume. So we're not going to use the be prepared to stop sign, just the 3 signs listed. So let's see who gets that first. The distance in feet.
All right, the questions box is open. Rachel says 500 feet.
The total distance from the pothole to the very first sign.
Robert says 1,600 feet. Doug has 2,595 feet. We're seeing 600, 1,500, 1,600. Another response.
Those are not correct.
We're seeing 1,700.
That's not correct. You got to look at the picture, folks, in the typical application number 10. All right. In 15 seconds, I'll drop another clue.
We're seeing 1,100 from Thomas.
I can't wait to hear how Thomas came up with that. Remember, this is a rural roadway, 55 miles per hour.
Bradley says 995.
That's not right.
Well, Ray, they might need some additional information.
Okay, when you're looking at the typical application, you know, that vacant area, let's go work our way south. So that vacant area south of the pothole, that's called the buffer space. So we need to add up the length of the buffer space and then the 100 feet for the taper. And then we got to add up A plus B plus C. So it's a lot bigger number than 900 feet.
Ray, we're seeing 2,655, 2,095, 1,500, 2,095, 1,600. Do you have the typical application you can show on the screen?
Yeah.
Michael says 1,800 feet. Stacy
There it is. You
says
see it?
1,100, 2,095, so different answers.
All right. Okay, let me see. I'm hoping I got this right. Okay, so as we look at this picture, let's start on the south end of this picture, the bottom. If I add up, this is a 2-lane rural road. So when we look at our tables, that's telling us that A, B, and C are equal to 500 feet each. Okay, did everybody see that in their the sign spacing table? So we got from road work ahead all the way up to the flagger, that's 1,500 feet just to the flagger. And then we have 100 feet for the taper length. That was a given, so we're at 1,600. Now I need to know the length of the buffer space. And when I go to the tables for spacing, and I go to the bottom, the tapers and flagger station distances, and I look at 55 miles per hour, and I go all the way to the right, and I look at flagger station / buffer, it says 495 feet. And so the answer would be what? 2,095 feet.
We have several individuals who said 2,095 feet.
Oh, good. I was about to think I was going to be embarrassed because maybe I didn't carry the one or something. I don't know. Okay, well, good. We had so hopefully I explained that well enough to the people that said 900 feet or 1,100 or 500. So I was looking for that total distance. So you can use that with Google Maps. And in our next part of the webinar, part 4, the final part, when we get into our exercises, I'm going to show you how to use Google Maps as a very good work zone design tool, because it will go through our individual steps of work zone design. So, step 1 is to find a typical application that fits your specific location. And in part 2 is to use those tables, spacing tables, with that typical application to come up with your specific sign spacing and your cone spacing and things like calculating how many cones you need in that taper at a minimum, and then using the tables on the bottom that show the length of tapers and buffer space length. And then when we're done with that, then we can go to Google Maps and get a nice aerial view of where we're working. And you can zoom in and then also get a good street view. And when you look at street view, you can see what kind of roadside you have and figure out if you have good places to put your signs. And then the final step is you can use the there's a part of Google Maps that is a measuring tool, so you can measure out distances from Google Maps, and then you can print out that overhead picture and with the measuring tool activated, and you can actually mark with a pen then where each sign will go and where the tapers begin, and where the buffer space begins and ends, and things like that. So I call it Ray's 4-step work zone design process, and that way you can have very quickly you can come up with a work zone plan before you leave the garage, so you know exactly how you're going to handle traffic, and plus it helps you load up your work truck with all the cones and signs and things like that you're going to need. So you're not going to be guessing, and when you get to the workspace to do your work, then you're going to have everything you need. You didn't forget anything. So anyway, I think that's a good place to end for today, Mike.
All right, thanks, Ray. And part 4 of this series is scheduled for May 1st. Is that correct?
I believe so, yeah. And then it'll probably be Monday before I send out certificates for today. To make sure that I get everybody's sign-in sheet that wasn't, maybe they aren't on the attendee report because they're watching it as a group in a conference room. So make sure you get me your sign-in sheets.
Well, thanks, Ray, for presenting today. We really appreciate it. And thanks, everybody, for your participation.
Okay, bye-bye, everybody. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks. Bye.